folks, this is Abrahm with Pathfinder TV, instructor at the Pathfinder School. In this video what we're going to talk about is sharpening your blades if you're in like a base camp type of scenario. In this case I'm up in the house, so obviously I have a whole bunch of different options to sharpen my blades, including power tools if I wanted to do that, but I prefer not to use power tools because even these methods I'm going to show you guys, you can do them out in the field if you want to carry the stones with you. The only issue is they're fairly big and you usually don't want to carry anything like that, and with power tools you won't have the option unless you got a really long extension cord, which just is not going to work if you're 3-4 miles out in the woods. So in other words, I want to get the power tools out of this scenario and just use what the old folks used to use back in the day, water stones and stones of that sort. So what we're going to sharpen today is two different blades, one being high carbon steel and the other one being stainless steel, just to show you guys the two different approaches you're going to have to use. And there's really not a different approach, it's just how hard it is to sharpen. Stainless steel is going to be a tad bit harder to sharpen, but it's going to stay sharper longer. With high carbon steel, it's a lot easier to sharpen in the field and it won't stay sharp as long as the stainless steel. So I've got a Battle Horse knife. I believe it's Battle Horse. I don't know if it's Blind Horse or Battle Horse. I think it's Battle Horse, but I've got one of their blades on one of the Pathfinder Gathering a couple years ago. We'll sharpen this up. This is the high carbon steel. And then I got a Mora Garberg, which is obviously the stainless steel. It's their full tang version of a Mora, which is stainless. And they're both fairly sharp right now, but I just want to go over the process you want to use to sharpen these blades. So we will go ahead and go over the Battle Horse knife first. And before I do that, let's talk about the stones. So if you guys let me adjust the camera, I have one stone soaking, the one I'm going to use, and then I've got 4 other stones varying in sizes that we'll talk about also. Camera closer so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about here. The first thing I have is just a stone holder. It's to hold the stones as I'm sharpening. It's got rubber feet on it, or rubber pads on the bottom, so that once it's wet it won't slide around on you, so it grips. So it's real nice to have. I definitely would invest in something like this if you plan on getting stones. Make sure it's going to fit the size stones that you purchase. Then what I have is a very, very cheap stone I got from Menards. This is, I don't think it's carburidium stone, but it's got a very coarse side, and then, I mean, the fine side's still pretty coarse for being what it is, but if I have to fix the edge, like there's chips or something, this is the stone I'm going to, really cheap. Again, I got it for like $2, and it came with a smaller stone too, so it's a very good deal, and it does get the job done. I mean, it does chip up a little bit easier just because it's a little bit cheaper stone, but it chips up a little bit easier because of that. Then what we have is, I'm going to move on to my more expensive stones. These are Japanese water stones. They're made by the company King. A lot of you guys may be familiar with them. I've got an 800 grit. This is the most coarse stone out of the water stones that I have. This is a lot coarser, the smaller one here, but out of these King water stones, that's the coarsest one. Then I've got a 1200, which is obviously a little bit finer as the number goes up. Then I've got a 6000 soaking right now. Those are the 3 water stones that I have. I got from Amazon by the company King, and they're very good stones. The issue is, I mean, you're going to pay like upwards of $20 per stone, just because they're the water stones. They're big. They're probably about 12 inches in length, and there's a lot of surface to work with them, but you're going to pay up for them. That's just something you need to be aware of before you go out looking for them. Again, these are King water stones. There's a lot more expensive stones than these King water stones, but these get the job done, gets a real nice edge on your blades, and it works out just fine. Then I'll go over this last stone I have. This is one I got from my grandfather. It's fairly fine. I like throwing this in my haversack because I can actually use it if I have to as kind of like a bench stone if I need to, or I can just use it in my hand and do circular motions. But it's very, very easy to pack in with you, and it's pretty fine just to do touch-up work. And I can't read it's got something on it, but it's faded away. Maybe it's carbide. Does that sound? Maybe it's carbide, I think is the word, and it looks like 6 600, but I think this is a lot finer than 600, but I'm not sure. But either way, it's an old stone, very easy to pack with you, and it gets the job done also. Obviously, with the water stones, you're going to be using water to lubricate them. You need to make sure you let them soak for quite a bit before you use them. This has been soaking for like 10 minutes. I like to let them soak for at least 15 minutes, 15 to a half hour. And then as you use them, keep them lubricated with water. With the water stones, you don't want to use oil, but with some stones, they recommend, or there's specific honing oil that you use. I don't like using the honing oil because it gets gunk in your stone over time, and water is not going to do that. And water you can get everywhere, and then the honing oil you cannot. So you need to think of that in the long run. Are you going to be able to find honing oil out in the woods? No. Are you going to find water? Yes. So even with the oil stones, you can use water, and it works just fine. Just something to keep it lubricated. So that's pretty much that topic there about the stones. Again, Amazon, for the whole set here, including the stand, which is like 15 bucks, I probably paid 20, 40, that was like 25, so 65, 80 bucks probably right here. Actually, I spent, I think it was more like 100 bucks, but that's for this set here with the 3 water stones, including the one in there, and then my stand was about 100 bucks. So you guys are looking at that for a decent set of stones. And then to finish up, I obviously use a strop, and that gets the job done. So I'm going to let the stone soak a little bit longer in the water, and then we will get started with the form that you want to use when you're sharpening your blades. Let stone soak for a couple more minutes, but while it's soaking, I want to talk about a little bit about the blades that I have here. The way you sharpen it is going to all depend on, because first of all, what you want to do is you want to keep this stone or that edge as close to what it was as possible, unless obviously you want to change like a convex to a Scandi for some reason or whatever. But the 2 blades I'm going to be sharpening are Scandi grinds. They're Scandinavian grinds. Those are probably the easiest to sharpen because once you tilt it to a certain point, it lays nice and flat. Then you can sharpen it with ease, opposed to something with convex when you have to do like kind of roll it as you're doing it because it's rounded over. You got to worry about that type of thing, which can be easy to accidentally change the edge. And when I first started sharpening these things with the sharpening stones, it takes quite a bit of skill to do it, because if you don't keep that angle dead on perfect, it's going to change it over time, and then you're going to end up with like a screwed up Scandinavian grind, which you don't want. A lot of people don't know this, but most Scandinavian grinds, they have a very small secondary bevel, like a micro bevel on them. So if you tilt it, I mean, it's going to look like it does, which is okay, but that's to keep the edge retention. So if you kind of tilt it and see light shine on the very tip or the very end of your blade all across, that's just the micro bevel, and that's okay. That's just to keep the edge retention on it, and it makes it for a good blade. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the stone out of the water here. And it's kind of got to stand itself, which is okay. So just set it on there. And this is the 6000. And you guys may be asking why I'm not starting with these. It's because this blade is fairly sharp, and I just want to do touch-up work, so I don't need to go to the 800 or the whatever 400 this thing is, 812. If it's fairly sharp, you may want to start on 1200, then go up to the 6000, but I'm going to start with the 6000 just to demo to you guys and strop it, and this thing will be hair-popping sharp. So what you want to be sure you're doing is keeping water on the stone as you're doing this. So I got a little cup here. I'm going to pour water, keep it lubricated as I do this. And I'll start like this. So once you lay it flat there, you can look under the edge and you can see a shadow. What you want to do is you want to tilt this blade up until it's gone. Once it's gone, that's when you've got your edge. And a lot of people do strokes like this. They'll come like stroke it across, which is just fine, but what I like to do is I like to rub it back and forth. So just get nice, just back and forth like this. That's all I like to do, because I can look at that edge, make sure I'm keeping it where it needs to be, and just continue to do this. Try to keep track of how long you do this on each side, because you want to make sure you do it on the other side just as long. And make sure you get the whole entire blade here, which the tip can be a little bit tougher. You're going to have to kind of tilt the butt of your handle up to get that tip, but all I'm doing is rubbing it. Just like this, guys. Very easy. And that Again, if it's pretty dull, you're going to have to start with the 800 and then, or chipped, maybe a little bit coarser. But when they're decently sharp, you don't have to worry about that. So there we go. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some more water on it. Again, keeping it lubricated is key to the success of this. Then I'm going to turn to the other side and do the same amount of time. I'm not keeping track of, as many times as I rub it back and forth, but just the estimated approximate time frame on each side. Again, don't get frustrated with this if you guys can't get it the first couple times, because it can be very tricky and frustrating. So just nice back and forth motion. That's the most success I've had with it, opposed to anything else. And I mean, this thing, you can get these things. You're not going to get an edge like this, maybe with machines, but when you're doing it by hand, there's just a certain bit of accomplishment when you do get it pretty sharp, or fairly sharp. It's just nice to know you can do it. Just make sure you're keeping that angle consistent. Consistency is key. There we go. And again, this was in pretty good shape. Just making sure you can slowly, if it's super sharp, you want to be very careful, but kind of feel across here to make sure there's no high spots or something weird with your edge. Chip, like a very small chip, or anything like that. Make sure you get that out of there. So I'm going to continue to do this process. I may bring the camera up a little bit closer to try to get that, angle you're looking for, and then we will move on to the stainless steel blade. Guys, if this ain't perfect, but I just want to show you what I'm talking about. Once I'm laying this flat on the stone, you see that shadow under there. If you tilt it up, it's gone. That's the angle you want. You can't see nothing under it. Up, if you do it like this, it's going to mess it up. So flat down. That's why these candies are very easy to sharpen and just go back and forth. Fairly easy. So there you go. Tilt it up. That's what you're looking for. Move on to the Mori Garberg, which is a stainless steel knife. Again, it's not going to be any different other than it may be a tad bit harder to sharpen. And the fact it's a Scandi grind, so it's basically the same type of deal with the angle. Get your stone lubricated and just rub it. Keep that angle constant. You're going to feel if the angle's off because it'll bite into the stone or something of that sort, which just be careful of. And sometimes the blade geometry may give you a little bit of a struggle where the belly of the blade's at, or if it's a real nice sweeping blade to it, may be a little bit trickier, but as long as the grind's the same, you just got to work around it. And I didn't mention this with the last one, but what you want to do is, as you get closer to finish and it gets, almost polished or a very nice edge on it, just loosen or lighten up your pressure. And just like a nice, gradually getting lighter with it, and it's going to build up a finer edge. Or a sharper one, keener. And once I get both of them done, I'll show you guys stropping with a leather piece of leather and some compound. And that will wrap it up, and that's going to get you a pretty dang close to razor sharp blade. So I don't want to bore you guys, I'm just going to continue this until I get them both where I want them. Folks, once you get your work done with the stones, what you want to move on to is stropping, and really the knives are sharp enough, they don't need to be stropped. I'm going to do it anyways. Both of them will shave, or they shaved without stropping, but just to get a very, very keen edge on it, we're going to go ahead and do it without or with stropping, so I can demonstrate to you guys. What I have is a piece of leather with the suede side, the rough side, and easier terms to understand, glued on a 2x4, and it's with the suede side facing out again. Then I've got some jeweler's rouge, and from my understanding, I like using the white stuff because the lighter the color, the finer it is. That's from my understanding. It may not be right, and it may just depend on the company you get it from too. Because I've also heard that green is finer, but the white works just fine. That's what I like using. I'm gonna just apply it on here. And once you get it all applied on there decently, you can put your piece up, and you can do this. A natural substitute for this compound is clay out in the woods if you want to do that. Or you can just use the leather straight up, like on your boot leather belt. You don't have to have that compound on it for it to work. Because basically what you're doing is you're going to take off any, or the micro edge or any wired edge you have left on there from the stones. Using something, a 6,000 grit stone, you really don't have much left over, though. So what you're going to do is, opposed to cutting into the leather, you're going to cut the leather that way. So what you want to do is, like you were doing with the stones, you don't want to do what you do with the stones. You want to lay it on there flat, get that angle, and pull away from the leather. Make sure you're pulling away from the leather so you don't cut it, obviously. You don't have to go a lot of pressure, and you don't have to go hard. And that, I mean, that on is getting a super fine edge on there. Super keen and sharp edge. And just try to keep track. I'm going to do approximately 10 on this side. I think that's about 10. Then I'll do 10 on this side. Just always try to keep track so that you don't, for some reason, screw it up. Get from the portion by the, I think it's ricotta, I think that's the name of it, the ricotta, all the way to the tip. I mean, that guy right there is very sharp. Very, very sharp. That's definitely going to get the job done if I need it to. See if it shaves. Oh, yeah. That's very sharp, guys. Just lighten up the pressure as you go across it. And as you see, what it's doing is it's leaving the black portion from the white compound to the black. That's just the material that you're removing off your blade. There we go. That's very good. Slide it up. I've got to wet form this sheath. The factory sheath that came with this is kind of like a bucket sheath. So if it rolls over, it's going to flip out. So I need to wet form that. Now let's do the garboard. Same thing. This is a very crucial step, in my opinion, to get your blade to proper sharpness. If you wear a leather belt with you, you're going to always have a strop with you, as long as it's genuine leather. And all the stuff in the video here is just what I found works the best. So maybe you don't like using compound on your leather, and again, I stated that you don't have to, so it's just all what I think works best for me. It may not work best for you. Just get out there and try it. You don't gotta purchase these $100 stones at first. Start with something like the Harbor, or the not Harbor Freight, but the Menards one. You can get them at Harbor Freight too, I'm sure. And just try it out, so you're not wasting money if it's not your thing. That one I'm sure is going to shave too. So what I'm going to do is I don't want to shave off all the hair on my arm, so I'm going to go get a piece of paper and we'll do the paper test. The pause in the video, guys. I had to go run a couple errands in town, but I'm back and I finished sharpening these when I was talking to you guys earlier about it. But again, I mean, you just finish stropping them. Once you do that, they should be hair popping sharp. So what I'm going to do is I've got some paper here, and we'll give it a shot. because I cut pretty cleanly. And what you want to think about, you don't just want to go crazy cutting this stuff. First off, paper will dull your knife over time, so you don't want to do a whole bunch of that. And second off, you want to come from the ricasso, or this portion of the blade, all the way to the tip and slice across, because if it catches anywhere, that means it's a dull spot. And if this belly is going to be a little bit of an exception because it's a weird angle on there. But I mean, if you aren't worried about it, you can try to and that. As you guys can see what I'm saying there. That belly's going to be a little bit of a portion there that will be a little different, but if you're slicing, you got to keep that slicing action. And then if you want to cut straight down, you should be able to do that too. So that right there, I mean, is crazy sharp. I mean, that is plenty sharp for me and what I do. Again, I mean, I can just give it a strop a couple more times here, and then that is what I call good. Again, let's try the Garberg and see what that does. Same concept. Get your paper, and that one is the paper bent there, but if you look at that, I mean, that tip there, it's hard to get the angle on that tip. Reach my eye real quick. But that tip can be a little tedious. There we go. So, I mean, slicing motion, I think you guys get the point. That right there is pretty sharp. So these are definitely sharp enough to mess around with in the woods. I'm Abrahm with Pathfinder TV, instructor at the Pathfinder School. I just showed a quick video on sharpening your blades in a base campy type of situation. If you're like a base camp and you can carry these stones, again, they're going to cost you quite a bit, almost an arm and a leg just to get them, but when you get a hold of them, they last a long time and they will definitely pay off in the long run. You can get your blades super sharp, super usable. The sharper the better in most cases. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week. Take care and have a good one.